My name is Rachel, and I'm 39. Life hasn't been easy lately. I lost my job months ago, and despite countless interviews and applications, nothing seemed to work out. Bills were piling up, and my options were running out. That's when he stepped in again, Josh, my 28-year-old nephew. I've spent more nights than I care to admit imagining what it would be like to feel his hands on me, to give him the kind of pleasure that would leave him breathless. He has always been more than just family to me. He's a walking temptation. Successful, confident, and devastatingly handsome, he's the kind of man that women notice the moment he walks into a room. But for me, it was something deeper. Maybe it was the way he always looked at me, like he wanted to say something he couldn't, or maybe it was the way I secretly loved teasing him, just to see him lose his composure. Either way, the thoughts I had about him would make anyone blush. I don't know why, but I wanted to see his pleasure and his alone. It was as if his satisfaction became mine, an unexplainable, overwhelming need that I couldn't ignore. He works in finance and makes more money than I could dream of. Over the years, he's helped me out financially more than I'd like to admit. It was embarrassing, to say the least, relying on him. But this time, I couldn't just take his money. When he offered to help me again, I told him I couldn't accept it without doing something in return. Cleaning his apartment twice a week felt like a fair trade, even if it wasn't ideal. Josh agreed, though I could tell he found the idea amusing. "Sure, Rachel," he said with a smile that lingered a little too long. "Let's give it a try." That first Tuesday, I showed up at his sleek, modern apartment downtown. It was exactly what I'd expected: clean lines, expensive furniture, and a view of the city that made you feel like you were on top of the world. I'd chosen my outfit carefully: a fitted tank top that clung to my curves and a pair of shorts that rode up just enough when I bent over. I knew Josh had always looked at me differently, longer than he should. It was something I'd noticed over the years, but never acknowledged. When he came home that afternoon, I was in the living room, dusting the coffee table. He walked in, loosened his tie, and paused. I could feel his eyes on me, taking in the way I leaned forward, my shirt riding up just enough to reveal a sliver of skin. "Hey, Rachel," he said, his voice lower than usual. I straightened up, turning to face him with a small smile. "Hey, Josh. Long day?" "You could say that." He tossed his suit jacket over the back of the couch and loosened the top button of his shirt. I went back to dusting, taking my time as I bent over to reach the lower shelf. I could feel his gaze, heavy and deliberate. It sent a thrill through me. "You don't have to try so hard, you know," he said, his voice closer now, teasing but with a subtle edge. I glanced over my shoulder, a playful smile tugging at my lips. "Well, if I'm going to clean, I might as well make it thorough," I teased, drawing out the word just enough to leave room for interpretation. Josh chuckled, stepping closer, his hands casually slipping into his pockets. "Thorough, huh? Does that mean you're getting into all the hard-to-reach places?" His tone was smooth, laced with suggestion, and his smirk told me he knew exactly what he was doing. I couldn't help but laugh, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. "Well, someone has to, right?" I shot back, enjoying the game more than I should. Josh's gaze lingered on me for a moment, his smirk softening into something warmer, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "Guess I should thank you for your dedication," he said, his voice low and deliberate. I laughed again, but this time it was softer, almost nervous, as I turned back to the counter, trying to focus on the cloth in my hand. My pulse quickened, and I couldn't stop the small smile spreading across my face. I liked his attention more than I was willing to admit. I saw him, saw the way he wanted me. I didn't hesitate, I spoke directly, my voice steady but daring. You want me? Then come and get me. That was all it took. In one swift motion, he closed the gap between us, his hands sliding around my waist as his lips crashed against mine. The kiss was hot and full of all the tension we'd been dancing around for years. I dropped the duster, my hands tangling in his hair as he pulled me closer. His grip on my waist tightened, and I couldn't help the small gasp that escaped when he pressed me against the wall. When he finally pulled back, his eyes searched mine, as if waiting for me to say something. I smirked, my fingers brushing against his jaw. Guess I'll have to work harder to please you. Josh laughed, the sound deep and rough, and I knew we'd crossed a line we could never go back from. What are we doing? I asked softly, even though I already knew the answer. Josh reached out, his fingers brushing against my cheek. Something we should have done a long time ago. His lips captured mine before I could respond. This kiss was different from the first, deeper, hungrier, like we'd both been holding back for far too long. His hands slid down my back, pulling me closer. I wrapped my arms around his neck, losing myself in the heat of his touch. Without breaking the kiss, he lifted me onto the counter, his hands firm on my thighs. My legs instinctively wrapped around his waist, and I could feel how much he wanted me. It sent a shiver through me, and I let out a soft moan against his lips. Do you want this? He asked, his forehead resting against mine as he caught his breath. Yes, I whispered, my voice shaky but certain. That was all he needed. His lips found mine again, and his hands moved with purpose, exploring every inch of me. I tugged at his shirt, and he pulled it off in one smooth motion, revealing a body that was lean, toned, and utterly irresistible. He carried me to the living room, laying me down on the plush couch. His kisses trailed from my lips to my neck, then lower, setting my skin on fire with every touch. My hands roamed over his back, his shoulders, desperate to feel every part of him. But in the back of my mind, there was a nagging thought I couldn't ignore. I was his aunt. He was my nephew. What were we doing? It didn't matter at that moment, though. All I could focus on was the way he made me feel, the way we both seemed to give in to something we denied for so long. Time seemed to stand still as we gave in to everything we'd been holding back. The way he touched me, the way he looked at me, it was as if he'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. When it was over, we lay there together, tangled in each other, the city skyline glowing through the windows. Neither of us said a word, but we didn't need to. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back now. When I walked into Josh's apartment that next Tuesday, everything felt different. The air between us was no longer heavy with unspoken tension, it was electric, charged, and thrilling. After what had happened on the couch, I knew there was no going back. Josh was waiting for me this time, standing in the kitchen with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He leaned casually against the counter, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Rachel," he said, his voice low and inviting. "Josh," I replied with a small smile, slipping off my jacket and setting it on the chair. I wasn't here to clean today. We both knew that. Without another word, he walked over to me, setting his glass down on the table as he stopped inches from where I stood. His fingers brushed my cheek, tracing a line down to my jaw, and I felt myself melting under his touch. "You know you don't have to do this," he murmured, his voice soft but full of intent. "I want to," I replied, my gaze locked on his. "I want to give you everything." That was all he needed to hear. Josh took my hand and led me to the living room, where the floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering city skyline. The room was bathed in the warm glow of the evening lights, casting long shadows across the sleek furniture. He turned to face me, his hands resting on my waist as he studied me. There was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before, something deeper, almost vulnerable, as if this moment meant more to him than just the physical. "Today is about you," I said softly, running my hands up his chest. Josh's lips curved into a small, almost shy smile, but it quickly faded as I pressed my body against his. I wanted to see him lose control, to feel the raw power of his desire. We moved to the couch, and I guided him to sit down, taking the lead in a way I never had before. His green eyes followed my every move, darkening with anticipation. I took my time, savoring every moment as I focused on him completely. Josh leaned back, his head resting against the couch as I explored every way to bring him pleasure. The way he responded, his quiet gasps, the way his fingers gripped the edge of the couch, made me feel powerful, in control, even as I gave myself fully to him. When his hands finally found me again, pulling me up, I could see the fire in his eyes. He held me as if he never wanted to let go, and when he kissed me, it was deeper, more passionate than ever. We lost ourselves completely that night, exploring boundaries we hadn't dared cross before. I gave him everything he wanted, everything he needed, without hesitation. It wasn't just about physical, it was about trust, about letting go of all the rules we'd built around ourselves and embracing the connection we tried so hard to ignore. Hours later, as we lay together on the couch, his arms wrapped around me, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. "You didn't have to do all of that," he said softly, his lips brushing against my forehead. "I wanted to," I replied, looking up at him. "You've always taken care of me. This is me taking care of you." Josh smiled, pulling me closer. "You've given me more than I ever expected, Rachel. More than I deserve." I shook my head, resting my hand on his chest. "You deserve it all, Josh. And more." As the city lights flickered outside, I realized that what we'd found together wasn't just an escape from our separate lives. It was something real, something worth holding on to, no matter how complicated it might be.